Well, here I've got some trichloroethylene, which I think basically is dry cleaning fluid, and it's pretty good at stripping greasy marks out of things. So we'll try some of that, see if that'll remove even more of that greasy rubbish. And the main drive here is to get rid of any greasy deposits, because otherwise the adhesive might not stick properly, and that wouldn't potentially be a big problem in the middle of a panel, but at an edge like this, when the leather is already stretched out of shape and therefore doesn't really want to lie flat, it's quite important that the adhesive sticks really well, because we'll be relying on the adhesive to actually pull that bump back down flat. So I'll pop that to one side. I'm looking at this side now. There's certainly a Zeiss bump right here. So it's pretty much the same deal, but the leather is stuck down quite well. Let's see if I can lift it. Oh yes, that's certainly stuck well. Right, I've peeled that back to the corner. And now I'm just peeling it back by hand. And I'm watching as I go, because I want to be sure that I don't tear anything. I'm at the gap there in for that bracket. I'm not going to chase these Zeiss bumps along that hinge line there. I think that's too fraught. I'm just going to clean up this surface. This side's by no means as bad as the other side, and I think the danger of tearing the leather there is fairly high, so I won't get into that. There's a little amount of corrosion here, or this verdigris rubbish, right along that hinge line. That's right along the edge of that. And I'll clean this with a bit of that trichloroethylene. Here's that leather from the other side. You can see that that trichloroethylene is removed. Pretty much all of that oily mark there. That's just a piece of glue that you can see there. So that's quite good. You can see it's quite a pronounced bump and it will not want to sit down flat, but I'll see what I can do about making it sit down flat. The adhesive I use is ADOS F2, and basically it's designed to be used as a contact adhesive, but of course I don't use it as a contact adhesive really. But what I'm going to do now, normally I just apply it to one surface, the leatherette, or the leather in this case. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to apply it to both surfaces. So I'm going to put some right there where that leather was bulged up. That's where the bump is, and that's going to be the hard part to get successfully stuck down. And I'll put some over there on the other side. Oops, we don't need great strings of that lying around the place. And here, I'll make sure I've got a base coat here. I'm going to spread it in right across this leather shortly to a full coat, but I'm just sort of putting a base coat here to make sure that's got a good base. I'll leave that to dry for a minute or so, and then I'm going to glue it back down. Of course you can't see anything because I've managed to move everything off camera again. Sorry about that. Okay, get this panel glued down now. So I'll apply some adhesive. The little patch I did earlier, that's all cured. Generally speaking, of course, it's not hard to get flat leather or flat leatherette to stick to a flat surface. It's difficult when the surface is somewhat less than flat. It's even worse if the leather is somewhat less than flat. Okay, so this is all looking pretty good. Let's get this piece in position now. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that the leather lies flat, particularly next to that strap lug where it was all bowed up with that greasy green crap. Making sure the leather is tucked in here at the edge against the casting. The leather on the Retina IIa is quite thick. It actually sits up at least level with the edges of the body, if not proud of them. There you go. That's quite good. That bump is gone now. That's as good a result as you could hope for. And on this side would be by no means as much a challenge, because it wasn't as stretched to start off with. Apply some adhesive to the leather. Make sure I've got a good even coat on there, and here I've got too much. Get rid of some of that excess. And we're going to get it down into this corner here. That looks like a pretty even coat. Roll that leather back into position. And this adhesive will you can just rub it away when it's in the semi-cured state. And I just need to make sure that the leather is pressed firmly down around that strap leg so that it lies flat. That's good. Well, that's dealt with our problems at the front of the camera. That looks very good. The camera back. Now here we've got these edges are up. You have to say that's a little bit unusual for them to flap like that. It sort of suggests somebody might have had a poke and a prod at this and then thought better of it. And at the back here we've got our bumps. But there's also some crap on the back of the leather. Now, that is probably corrosion from the leather case that the camera has been in. So I'm just going to see if that rubbish cleans away. Because it's the same sort of thing, it's that green corrosion product. And it's embedded in the leather itself. And I think that's just where it's been up against the rivet in the case. It certainly appears to be the case. So we've got a Zeiss bump here, okay. The colour's gone there, but that's quite, that'll come back. And there's a patch of rubbish right here. Little patch of green filth here. Alright, I'll see if I can get this leather lifted. This is thinner leather than was on the front of the camera. Yeah, these corners didn't come up naturally. I can tell by the way this leather is well stuck that those corners didn't flap by themselves. Someone has started this business peeling it off and then chickened out. Yeah, you can see the filth under the corners there, this green stuff. I want to get all the way back to here. To get back to there, really I've got to go right back to here, because if I fold it up anywhere else you'll end up with an obvious line. If you take it back to an edge like that, that's not a problem. That'll work well. I'm going to see how this leather peels. And what I'm watching for here is the fibres underneath here, seeing how they're behaving, whether it's peeling away cleanly, whether there's any sign of delamination of the leather. I'll probably have to think again. But what I want to achieve now is get this leather folded back to this line. At this end here, this plane here, that's the catch end, that's nickel plated brass, and here of course is aluminium, and the difference can make a the different metals can make a difference to the way adhesives stick. Well, we're down to our Zeiss bump. Right, now I just want to take it to this corner and no further. That's it. So you can see that this greasy green filth has left its mark there in the leather. You've got to scrape off all that can be scraped off and then clean the rest of it with some solvent. And here are the lumps on the back of the camera. It's the same and down here too. Anywhere there are rivets through the aluminium back, and here, and here. This bigger patch of green stuff is just where it's been spread about, probably when somebody was poking and prodding at the leather thinking about lifting it up. Let's get that filth out from there. One thing you should be aware of with the Retina IIa cameras and their related models is that the paint on the back door, the edges of the back door, will come off if you look at it the wrong way. It was always a crappy job. It never bit into the aluminium and got any tooth as far as I can tell. They were probably hard pressed to get them out of the factory with the bloody paint still in the right places. And how you go about repainting leather, that's a story for another day. I'm still experimenting with methods for repainting. But all of them require a good deal of disassembly. Alright, well our bumps here are not too severe and they'll probably glue down okay. The bumps at this point and this point, they'll probably be alright. It's still a bit greasy looking. I want to see if I can get that a bit better than that. Yeah, you can see it's coming off. I'll lift that filth out of the leather. And And this is much the same process as I used doing the leather on the front of the camera. I'll make sure I've got adhesive applied to these bumps where the bumps are and the matching places on the body, and then I'll put a full layer of adhesive on there after that's had a time to cure, and that should do the job. Alright, that looks good. Let's get this adhesive in place. If you hear a common advice when dealing with Zeiss-bumps is that you should treat the spot where the bump had formed with some lacquer to prevent the electrolysis and prevent it happening again. Well, of course, the adhesive was just as good as sealing anything as any lacquer would be, so I would skip the idea of using lacquer. I don't think it's going to get you anywhere useful. Well, not with this adhesive anyway. If you're using some anemic adhesive, perhaps that would be the case. Right, so make sure I've got a primer layer under there. And these two bumps here. I'll just let that dry and then I'll come back, full coat of adhesive, get the leather stuck back down, no problem. I'll get this leather glued back down now, I think. So doing larger pieces like the back here is a bit trickier, trying to get an even layer on the leather, making sure you're well covered, particularly to the edges, and doing all this before the adhesive dries. We've got that part of the leather done. Let's do this part. This is the easier part because the other piece is still stuck down, of course. Right, we should be in business. Run that down. And here the important thing is to make sure that the leather is nicely centred, that you haven't got it running up over the edge on one side and leaving a gap on the other. It should be centred in that groove. Well, the bumps on the back there have gone completely. I'm just going to wipe down these two edges here with some naphtha on a cotton bud, and that's just to remove traces of adhesive that have snuck over the edge there. Naphtha's fine for that, it won't damage the paint, what's left of it. Now here, let's get that glue off there. Now here's where the leather was flapping at the ends and we had two large bumps. Just getting that leather tucked right in. Let's have a look at the state of these bumps. You have to be a bit judicious about pressing down leather that's thin and stretched, because you can just about press the embossing right out of it if you're not too careful. That's looking pretty good. I'm quite happy with that. Of course, we only lifted it as far as here. That's the leather on the back of the camera. That's quite good now. We can see you've got a circular mark there. Now that's from the case. That's from the case that this thing was been sitting in. And that also had a big patch of nasty green crap on it. At the front, leather sitting down nice and flat. Now of course I didn't attack these bumps at this point, and that's because the leather's very thin there. That's a bit fraught. I've left that. Likewise, there's a bump right here on the end, again at the hinges. That leather's very thin. It's very prone to tearing at that point. It's not something to attack lightly. So if you've got a very minor problem, leave it well alone. More frequently with retinas you end up with a big blob here. In the earlier models you end up with a blob there as well to match. And they're a bit unsightly. Of course the leather loses its colour where it's on a high spot. It gets rubbed. It also gets stretched. But that's looking quite good. Once I rub a bit of polish into that later, that'll look 100%. That part's done. Well, as you can see, I did get the camera completed. There were no further complications and no real problems. So I think this one will be a good one now. I'll just finish doing the final clean-up on this and can go back to its owner. It cleaned up very well. It's behaving nicely. Zeiss-bumps are a thing of the past and should make a nice user. Thanks for watching.